You think you know her face. History has painted her as the ultimate nightmare, a creature so hideous that a single glance would turn a brave warrior into cold, lifeless stone. We call her a monster. We call her a villain. But what if the history books lie? What if the most terrifying creature in Greek mythology wasn't the woman with snakes for hair, but the jealous, vindictive gods who made her that way? Before the hiss of serpents and the statue garden of dead men, there was just a girl. And to understand the horror of her end, you must first witness the tragic beauty of her beginning, and the one pure thing that would eventually rise from her spilled blood. Long before she haunted the nightmares of the Hellenic world, Medusa was a vision of ethereal perfection, born from the union of two primordial sea deities, Phorcys and Ceto. While her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, came into this world as Gorgons, twisted hybrids of woman and beast, Medusa was born mortal and cursed with a beauty so profound it rivaled the Olympians themselves. Growing up on the sun-drenched coasts of Greece, her life was a tapestry of innocence. She didn't dream of power or marriage. Her heart belonged entirely to the goddess of wisdom, Athena. There was a boy, Iphicles, a childhood friend whose heart beat in rhythm with hers, but even the sweet temptation of his love could not sway her. Medusa had a higher calling. She dreamed of the white robes and the hallowed silence of the temple, aspiring to become a priestess of Athena. This was a path that demanded absolute purity, a life devoid of earthly pleasures, mirroring the virgin goddess she adored. When she finally ascended the temple steps, she was the embodiment of devotion, her conduct pristine, her discipline unwavering. But perfection, as Medusa would soon learn, is a dangerous thing to possess in the presence of the gods. Her rituals were mesmerizing. Crowds began to gather not just to honor Athena, but to catch a glimpse of the priestess whose movements seemed to weave a spell over the air itself. Her hair, a cascading waterfall of silk, caught the light in ways that made the torches dim in comparison. It started as a whisper, then grew into a dangerous rumor, until one foolish man dared to speak the words that would seal her fate. He claimed that Medusa's hair was more beautiful than Athena's own. High atop Mount Olympus, the air grew cold. Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, looked down and saw her temple filled with people whose eyes were fixed not on her statue, but on her servant. While Athena possessed the wisdom to restrain her initial anger, recognizing that the girl was innocent of intent, another god was watching with a far more sinister purpose. Poseidon, the lord of the seas, harbored a deep, ancient grudge against Athena for losing the patronage of Athens. He saw in Medusa not just a beautiful woman, but a weapon. He realized that the most devastating way to hurt his rival was to corrupt the one thing Athena valued most, the absolute purity of her temple. The tragedy unfolded with the inevitability of a tidal wave. Medusa was walking by the shore, the salt air tangling in that famous hair, when the ocean began to churn. From the foaming surf rose Poseidon in all his terrible glory. He called her name, his voice like the roar of the deep, and tried to seduce her with the charm of a deity. But Medusa, terrified yet resolute, remembered her vows. She rejected the god of the sea, a rejection that bruised his divine ego and ignited a fury that would consume them both. She fled, her breath tearing at her throat, running towards the one place she believed was a sanctuary, the Temple of Athena. Poseidon gave chase, a relentless storm in human form. Even the brave Iphicles, who stepped in to defend his love, was swatted aside like a fly, knocked unconscious by the backhand of a god. Medusa scrambled into the holy chamber, falling to her knees before the statue of her goddess, begging, screaming for protection. But the marble eyes of Athena remained cold and unblinking. There was no divine intervention, only the heavy, wet footsteps of Poseidon echoing on the stone floor. There, on the sacred altar, the god exacted his revenge, possessing her by force, defiling the priestess and shattering the sanctity of the temple in one cruel act. When the violence ended and Poseidon departed, laughing at his victory, Medusa was left broken, ashamed, and filthy. But the nightmare had only just begun. The air in the temple shimmered, and Athena finally appeared. But she did not come to comfort her traumatized servant. She came to punish. Blinded by pride and the rigid laws of purity, Athena blamed Medusa. She claimed it was Medusa's vanity, her flamboyant beauty, that had tempted the god and desecrated the holy ground. The punishment had to be total. Athena raised her hand, and the transformation began. A visceral, agonizing warping of flesh and bone. Medusa's delicate skin hardened and cracked, taking on the scales of a reptile. Her terrified screams turned into guttural hisses as that beautiful silken hair began to writhe, thickening into venomous vipers that bit and snapped at her own face. She was stripped of her humanity, molded into a monster so hideous that no living thing could bear to look at her. The tragedy reached its crescendo when Iphicles, recovering from Poseidon's blow, stumbled into the temple, calling her name. He found her weeping in the pitch-black shadows, begging him to stay back. But his love was stronger than his fear. He approached, reaching out to touch her trembling shoulder, offering words of comfort. It was the last thing he would ever do. A serpent on her head struck, biting his hand. Medusa spun around in shock, and their eyes met. In a split second, the boy who had loved her since childhood, the only person who saw the human beneath the horror, turned gray. His flesh calcified, his expression of concern frozen forever in cold stone. Medusa screamed, wrapping her arms around the statue of her best friend, weeping tears that no longer mattered. To prevent hurting anyone else, she fled into the wilderness, but her curse followed her. Innocents who crossed her path became statues, leaving a trail of petrified horror that birthed the legend of the monster. She exiled herself to a desolate, abandoned region, finding shelter in the ruins of an ancient temple that time had forgot. For years, she lived in isolation, her humanity slipping away as the world outside concocted stories of a beast that needed to be hunted. Yet, even in the depths of her misery, a spark of the old Medusa remained. One day, while hunting rodents for survival, she uncovered an ancient, broken bust of Athena in the rubble. It was a cruel irony, but instead of destroying the image of the goddess who ruined her, Medusa cleaned it. She placed it on a makeshift altar and began to worship once more. She tended to the ruins, proving that while her body was monstrous, her soul retained a nobility that the gods themselves lacked. Athena, watching from the heavens, finally felt a pang of regret. She saw the creature tending to her shrine with gnarled hands and realized the injustice of her judgment. But the curse was irreversible. The gears of fate were already turning, and a young warrior named Perseus was approaching, armed with a shiny shield and a destiny written in blood. The final confrontation was not a battle, but a mercy-killing. Medusa, sensing an intruder, felt her bestial instincts rise, preparing to ambush the warrior in her lair. But this time, the enemy did not look at her. Perseus used the polished surface of Athena's shield, the aegis, as a mirror. He watched the reflection of the Gorgon, tracking her movements without meeting her deadly gaze. With a single, sweeping blow, he severed her head. Medusa died without ever seeing her killer. But from the gruesome stump of her neck, something miraculous occurred. Medusa had been pregnant with Poseidon's offspring since that horrific night in the temple, and in her death they were finally released. From her blood sprang Chrysaor, the warrior of the golden sword, and Pegasus, the majestic winged horse. Pegasus was pure white, untainted and beautiful, a physical manifestation of the innocence that had been stolen from Medusa years ago. In the aftermath, Perseus gifted the severed head to Athena, who affixed it to her shield. History interprets this as a final act of dominance, a war trophy. But perhaps it was something else. By placing Medusa's face on the aegis, Athena ensured that her loyal priestess would forever remain by her side, protecting the goddess she loved so much, immortalized not just as a monster, but as a guardian. So, the next time you see the image of the Gorgon, do not just see the snakes and the stone. Remember the girl who prayed in the silence of the temple. Remember the victim caught in the crossfire of divine egos, and ask yourself, in a world of cruel gods and tragic mortals, who was the real monster?